Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hello, I'm Garrette Clark, and I'm the Sustainable Lifestyles Program Officer at UNEP, and I'm going to be starting this exciting event. Okay, so I think we might as well start and get off on this exciting topic today. Adriana Zacharias was unable to open the webinar today, so I'll be stepping in for her. As I mentioned, I'm the Sustainable Lifestyles Program Officer, and we are so delighted to be able to meet with all of you to talk about this topic. It's one of the most highly subscribed webinars in quite a while, and we're not surprised. So just to give you a bit of context, UNEP is dedicated to advance the environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainable development in general. And our core mission is to address the triple planetary crisis across climate, nature, and pollution. And doing this by taking challenges and turning them into opportunities, promoting circularity, sustainable consumption and production, which we call SCP, and applying nature-based solutions, responsible financing, and convening new stakeholders to co-create solutions. And today's webinar is one of the main inroads into looking at some of those new stakeholders. Now, we've all heard about this term circularity. It's very present in the sustainable development context, but as it challenges the current economic model, the challenge around it is not just to close the loop, but to ensure that our overall consumption patterns change, because a circle that just keeps getting bigger is not going to be addressing the challenge before us. Emerging research shows us that up to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are associated with our household consumption and the systems that feed how we meet our basic needs and live our aspirations. And figures are equally strong around biodiversity loss and pollution. Now, at our household level, we consume around food, mobility, housing, and leisure. And leisure includes tourism, but also consumer goods. And today we are discussing one of the quintessential consumption sectors, fashion, because people don't necessarily make fashion decisions based on sustainability impacts or just preparing for the weather. People make decisions around price, access, and perhaps most importantly, trend factors and cultural context. And we know that this increasing consumption is hurting people and planet. Now, the situation becomes more challenging when we note that 2 to 3 billion new urban young consumers are going to be coming online, and they get their information, they make their aspirations known, they shape their aspirations, and they make their consumption decisions around social media. So youth are setting consumption trends, and they're going to be tomorrow's decision makers. They know what they want, what inspires them, what they're looking for, and they tend to have an increasing interest to be more socially relevant. So today we're going to be looking into how the challenge of unsustainable fast fashion perhaps can also be an opportunity to use what is driving our passion for fashion for good. And we're going to be looking at the science around consumption, and our speakers are going to drive into its drivers. Globally, fashion and sustainable fashion is a super hot topic. I think that's the reason why many of us are here today. And certainly across UNEP, UNEP is looking at the textile sector, fashion, and other living sectors that are driving the planetary problems. And supporting this particular webinar are two initiatives: the Go for SDGs, as its acronym suggests, initiative, and the One Planet Network. And both of these initiatives aim to implement the Sustainable Development Goals and the SCP agendas. And the One Planet Network does through by synergizing experts, governments, and creating synergy along policy and key methodologies and tools, and look specifically into 6 areas, which include sustainable lifestyles, consumer information, and other living domains like food, tourism, and housing. Now, the Go for SDGs initiative takes a lot of the wealth of that global tools, methodologies, and processes and works in partnership to tailor what makes sense at the regional level. Because what sustainable living looks like in Bangkok is different from what it looks like in Mexico City or Cali or Rabat or Paris. And we know that empowering youth is a major component of that. So we know, again, that youth, these new end consumers, that they spend their money on food, phones, and fashion. And so today's event is bringing together a lot of different members across UNEP to open the doors to some of the new partners and thinking that we need to bring into bear to address sustainable consumption in this area. Now, a quick word on UNEP's work in textiles is that it's guided by an overall textile flagship strategy, which is the result of consultations for over 140 experts. And there's an upcoming report called Sustainability and Circularity in the Textile Value Chain, a Global Roadmap. And these consultations resulted in these 3 priority areas that are needed to promote circularity. The first of which is obvious, is shifting consumption patterns. The second, looking at infrastructure investment, which includes renewable energy, waste, and water, and also looking at improved practices, such as resource efficiency, chemicals of concern, and worker protections. Now, again, at the heart of UNEP's flagship strategy is collaboration, actually the heart of much of the work that UNEP does. And a recent example is the fashion industry target consultation that was launched at the Global Fashion Agenda. And I'm sure that there are a number of people here today who are aware of that or were involved in that. And it's to ensure that a diverse range of voices are heard in identifying and converging industry-aligned targets, as well as in setting new targets. And we know that there need to be targets set where there are none, such as in the area of circularity design and purchasing practices. And as part of this consultation, UNEP, in working with the Go for SDGs initiative at the regional level, will be hosting virtual regional workshops in Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean and West Asia. And this will ensure that those regional realities are best reflected in that work. So there's going to be an online survey that's available until the end of January. And I highly suggest that if this consultation process is of interest to those who are here, please leave a note in the chat. We'll certainly be reaching out to you on that. But it's just to give you a flavor of the work that we're doing in the textiles area, and that this webinar is part of a broader effort to address the sector in its totality. So with that brief introduction, and we hope that we've been able to invite and have more participants join us then, I'd like to turn the event over now to today's moderator, Rachel Arthur. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Garrett. Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here this afternoon, this morning, this evening even, depending on which time zone you're on. We're here to talk about shifting the narrative, shifting the fashion narrative, rethinking aspiration in a world of overconsumption. So consumption, one of the biggest words this week when it comes to, of course, everything to do with shopping, everything to do with discounting. It is Cyber Week. It is, of course, Black Friday in just 2 days' time. Laura, please, you can go back one slide. I'll come to that one in just a moment. And of course, now it's everything to do with the mega sales that surround that day and this week, and of course, this entire month. So my name is Rachel Arthur. I'm the Sustainable Fashion Advocacy Lead at the UN Environment Programme, which means my job is very heavily focused on tracking weeks like this and the impact such consumption has on both people and planet, as well as how we change it. Interestingly, and many of you engaged in sustainable fashion will already have seen this, there is a growing movement to boycott Black Friday, with numerous brands over the past few years, indeed this year as well, refusing to participate in the discounts for the sake of environmental concerns. Now, this in of itself isn't new, but it's increasing and it's gaining more awareness by consumers, which leads me nicely onto the fact that consumers more broadly are being presented with two very different worlds right now. So if I can ask for the next slide. On the one hand, this is the kind of messaging that we are seeing. This is the one where the Black Friday boycotts live. From a storytelling standpoint, this is what we see a lot of in fashion today. It's all about those sustainability targets and the messaging that goes with it. There's lots and lots in the way of good progress. There's tons of positive developments. For those of us in this space, we are very well aware of all of these good things that are happening. We know it's the key topic in the industry, and it's filtering down more and more to shoppers, which is incredibly promising and really, really good. And yet on the other side of the same coin, if I could ask for the next slide, here is what else is being seen. This is where discounts and markdowns are everything. This is where buying new, buying volume is everything. It's about TikTok hauls, Instagram influencers, the power of WeChat, promoting newness and cheapness, you name it. This is the other story. And unfortunately, it really is still the main story. This is the one away from the sustainability echo chamber. It's the mass message of fashion today, built on a very, very powerful marketing engine that feeds us a narrative that is about a linear system of take, make, and waste, or indeed about extraction, exploitation, and disposable consumption. So at UNEP, we asked what it would look like to change it all, to try and cut out the greenwashing and to address the notion of fashion's role in consumer behavior, consumer values, and ultimately in culture. This has been a very big focus of our work over the past couple of years, looking at the role of the communicator, the power of storytelling and of shifting the narrative, redefining the way that fashion sets aspiration, desire, status, and how it ties to self-identity, belonging, and beyond. The ultimate aim is to build demand and inspire action for a positive fashion future, geared around a new narrative of regeneration, equity, and care. If I could ask for the next slide. Anchoring this is a commitment that we added on communication to the UNFCCC Fashion Charter during COP26 last year, which addresses all of this. And then we harnessed that and we turned it into a guide that we will launch early 2023 called the Sustainable Fashion Communication Playbook. And this aims to provide a shared vision, principles, and guidance on how to align consumer-facing communication to sustainability targets across the sector, to the 1.5-degree pathway of the Paris Agreement, and to the wider Sustainable Development Goals. It seeks not only to provide a template for what sustainable fashion communication should entail on the information-based side of things, so covering key topics including accuracy and transparency, but also through a cultural lens, thus covering the creative responsibility and opportunity that lies in shaping and promoting this new narrative. So today's event is about digging into this and the layers that it talks to in terms of how to actually do so across the 4 areas that we've identified as critical. They are leading with science, changing behaviours and practices, reimagining values, and driving advocacy. So our speakers today are here to do exactly that, between them highlighting that consumption change is where the most significant need and opportunity for sustainability lies. Now, we were going to kick off today with Luca from the Hot or Cool Institute, who has been working on an incredible report, putting some numbers behind fashion consumption, where we're at in the G20, and by what amount things need to change in each of those countries. Unfortunately, he is now unable to attend, so I'm just going to try and spend a couple of minutes before we welcome our panelists talking to what they are seeing in this report. I by no means am going to do this justice, but hopefully I will give everybody a little bit of an introduction to it and set the scene in terms of intrigue to go and find out some more. So as we know, the fashion sector is on its way to doubling its emissions of climate damaging gases by 2030, and it could uptake over a quarter of the world's carbon budget by 2050. We also know that global emissions must be reduced by 45 to 55% if we are to have a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. In Hot or Cool's report, Unfit, Unfair, Unfashionable, Resizing Fashion for a Fair Consumption Space, which launches tomorrow, we see that fashion consumption needs to be reduced by 60% on average by 2030 among G20 high-income countries. So that includes the likes of Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, the UK, and the US. The report also shows, however, that fashion consumption is highly unequal between and within countries, as you can see in some examples here. While the richest 20% in the UK, for instance, emit 83% above the 1.5 degree target, 74% of people in Indonesia live below sufficiency consumption levels of fashion. So there's room there actually for growth. The report goes into huge depth on how then we need to be thinking about driving change, looking at things through a systems change lens, and recommending that consumption and lifestyle change is put firmly on the table as a big lever for all of this, alongside production and efficiency gains. Neither of those things alone will get us there, so we have to look at doing both together. These results call for urgently addressing reductions in overproduction and overconsumption as the most effective strategies for reducing the carbon footprint of fashion, it says. For anyone interested, as I mentioned, the report launches tomorrow. It will be done so with a live event, which our team will share the link for right now in the chat. So over to our panel for today. I am really thrilled with those that we have joining us. I'm going to announce all of them now, and then we will hear from them one by one on their different topics. So joining us today, we have Lucy Shea, CEO of Futerra, Jalal Moghraby, instructor at the School of Architecture and Design at the Lebanese American University, Lancheros, fashion editor at the Metro World News Latin America, and Alec Leach, author of The World is on Fire, but We're Still Buying Shoes. So welcome, everybody. Thank you ever so much for being here with us today. I am going to first turn over to Lucy to give us a little scene setter from her perspective, and then we will hear from each speaker one by one before we will open to a bit of a Q&A from me and then a Q&A from the audience as well. So please get your thinking caps on for any questions that you might have. Feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, and we will come to those after each of the talks. Lucy, over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. And also delighted and honoured to join this panel. Such a brilliant group of speakers. So really, really pleased to be here. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and all those things. So I am the Group CEO of Futerra and have worked on sustainable fashion communication for a very long time. I'm a member of the UNFCCC Fashion Charter Steering Committee, trustee of Fashion Revolution. We invented the swishing campaign, clothes recycling, before all these apps, which are better, popped up, and do a lot of work with fashion clients. So really delighted to share. Now I'm going to share my screen here, and let's just put that on presenter view. So give me a thumbs up. Oh, actually, I can't see anyone. Tell me if that's not working. Otherwise, I'll keep going. All right. So hang on. There we go. A few words on Futerra, very briefly, and then I'll crack on with supporting what we've heard about the need to communicate, but also a little bit on how. From a practitioner perspective, running an agency perspective. So Futerra is all about a mission, basically. We are a mission with a business, really, in some ways. We are majority female owned. We're a founding B Corp in the UK. We have this mission, which is make the Anthropocene awesome. And what that means is Anthropocene is the age of humans, our new geological era, but it's often spoke about the Anthropocene in a very negative way. You know, we mucked it all up, basically. But we believe that it's possible to make the Anthropocene awesome, not just less bad or a little bit, marginally better, but actually awesome. And the reason we put this mission out there is that we've got this mega problem at the moment of fatalists. The 1 in 5 young people who think it's too late to solve climate change or to create climate justice, and that nothing we do now can bend the curve away from a 1.5 degree temperature change. So this is probably the problem of our time, and a little bit more on this as we go through about how to tackle that. What we do at Futera is logic and magic, so very deep sustainability strategies and KPIs. So for example, we took Formula One net zero by 2030 a few years ago, but we also work on the magic and creative. So for example, we created the ads for the Fridays for Future school strikes back in 2020. And because of this work, we're the first agency to be named an official climate solutions provider, a first professional services business to be named that. And that means that 90% of our revenue needs to be targeted towards climate solutions, climate justice. And actually, if we're looking at changing behaviours and practice and market as an agency, that's really one of the biggest things we can do, is not our footprint, but our brain print. I've got a hand up. Hang on, let me just see. I unfortunately can't see anyone's hands up, so I'll keep going, but there's lots of times for questioning at the end. Okay, so delighted to hear the hot and cool report that's coming. I will be tuning in tomorrow. I have been literally waiting for this guidance on 1.5 degrees lifestyles, and also really excited about the coming UNEP Playbook. So the team asked me to dive into 2 of the key principles of sustainable fashion communications. One that we need to lose, which is messages encouraging overconsumption, eradicating them, and one that we need to see more of, championing positive changes and demonstrating accessible solutions to helping individuals lead more sustainable lifestyles. So,
sorry to interrupt you. We're not actually seeing your slides move through. I realise we've still just on the title slide. So I think it's because you might have it in presenter view, but the screen that we're seeing shared is not the presenter version. It's just the slides themselves. So I don't know if you just want to flick through them there rather.
Yeah. So hang on a sec. Let me try doing this. Thank you. And don't worry, you haven't missed much, because it kind of the presentation really kind of starts now. Hang on, I need to stop sharing, go back with audio. Give me a moment.
No worries, thank you.
There we go, share sound. Can you see here?
So we can see, yeah, it looks like that's right now. Maybe just flick down a slide and just make sure that we can definitely do so.
How's that?
Yep, perfect.
Great. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so just a moment to support what we heard earlier on why communication is so important. So, or why the Playbook and those who work in communications have this crucial role right now. So we've had this recent validation of the crucial importance of story. From IPCC, it was the word on everyone's lips at COP. And there's this increasing evidence base that we literally write our own story, create our own story, and play it out. So back to those fatalists, those 1 in 5 young people who think it's too late to do anything about this. That's what we need to change. And communicators, your time has come to play a crucial role in this. So don't give up your jobs and start doing volunteering as beach cleanups. Apply your skills to this pressing issue we have at hand of getting rid of greenwashing and upping the profiling of sustainable solutions. I mean, do a beach cleanup as well if you want. I love those. One of my favorite kids' books is called Clean Up, but apply your skills in what you know in the pursuit of climate justice. and sustainable solutions. Now, if you've set yourself this task, you are pushing at an open door. The searches on how to live a sustainable lifestyle from Google Trends was shown at the start of the pandemic to explode by 4,550%. So you'll often hear that, oh, people aren't interested in consuming this. I mean, look at this. This is self-directed searches for a sustainable lifestyle. So small wonder that we see this kind of race to catch up and this policy explosion and regulation of greenwash guidance. So the EU is one player that's moving here, but we've got the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK and the Norwegian Consumer Authority, all moving to help eradicate those messages of overconsumption and overstating green claims. That's great. But what I think is possibly even more interesting is this move around upping the ante on the power of communications for positive change. So you can see here, this is a quote from the latest IPCC report, annual report 6, chapter 5. It's written in policy or scientific language, but there are some absolute gems in there. So what it says is that moving from just a focus on supply side, so energy providers, and looking at demand side, so how we live and eat and work and shop or share, how we use clothes and sustainable fashion. So behavioural changes, looking at that demand side, can cut greenhouse gas emissions by 5% globally. That might not sound very much, but it is. It is the global greenhouse emissions of Brazil. And now that we've got Lula, thankfully, sorting that out, this is our task here. So back to these fatalists and why we've got this problem. This is a quote from my colleague Solitaire saying that climate change is now communicating itself. Degradation, overconsumption, in some ways, is now communicating itself, and it's the solutions that need our storytelling help. So how do we do this? If we look at a couple of lighthouse examples, and again, the UNEP Playbook is going to be packed with these, so do seek it out when it launches. I'm going to show 2 from our work and then look a little bit wider at the market, and I'm going to do this all in about 4 minutes. Okay, so looking at how we can champion positive changes and demonstrate accessible solutions to help individuals live a more sustainable. Okay, so Prada might not be the most accessible solution, but let me tell you a little story about Econel and the partnership that we see here. So Econel is our client, and we work with them to help reposition their brand for growth. And what Econel is, it's a very high-grade polymer, which is produced by recycling old nylon, including things like fishing nets. So it's a kind of a closed loop solution. But the issue they had is they had this very kind of literally showing fishing nets, very overtly environmental branding, which didn't match with the kind of aesthetic of high fashion or even mass market fashion or interiors of kind of who they were partnering with and selling into, like Adidas or Stella, etc. So, and this is where, again, this is what communicators know. We search for a product truth for Econel, and the product truth is that it's so high grade, this polymer, that it can go round and round and round in regenerating and recycling. So it's not like PET, which you can recycle once, turn into a puffer jacket, and then it's too floppy, you can't do anything with it again. The possibilities are endless. So that became its positioning. And in terms of showcasing positive changes, Prada bought out its entire advertising campaign in fall 2019, I think, to focus on its Re-Nylon partnership with Prada. So with Econel even. So an example of showing what communicators do really well, which is branding and positioning, and using it to help drive sustainable solutions and positive change. Now, you might not be working as you know, a kind of a born good brand. You might have a brand that wants to be born again, a mainstream brand, or in that mainstream ecosystem, and thinking, well, what can I do with this? So I'll give you a brief example here of Tommy Hilfiger, another one of our partners, who wanted to kind of really rework some of their business strategy and their positioning around sustainability. Now, the main piece I'd say here for Born Again is you've got to have a very strong sustainability strategy from which your communications can spring off from. So as marketeers or communicators, make best buddies with the sustainability team or anyone within the organization who can understand the material issues that you need to communicate, and then look at how the sustainability strategy can help drive brand growth, and so, you know, make you the best friend of the business team. So this is just one example here of how Tommy's platform, which is Welcome All and Waste Nothing, drives innovation such as their resale re-commerce platform, Tommy for Life. But probably, you know, one of the most powerful players within resale and re-commerce has got to be Depop. And now I show this because while obviously there's debate around whether Depop is still fueling overconsumption, it's been really clever about the way it's constructed its site and its communications and marketing. I mean, it looks and feels like Instagram. It plugs into where those young audiences that Garrett talked about are living their lives, basically. And so it's an easy slot in for, you know, buying not new instead of buying new. And this leads me to my last point on how to, you know, demonstrate positive changes, drive further behavior change. And that's to look at your, well, your entire digital strategy, bringing in Web3, metaverse, etc. But in the interest of time, specifically at your content creators or your influencers, a really underused asset in promoting a sustainable lifestyle, because what influencers do is automatically speak in a very authentic and believable and true to themselves way. And this can be harnessed to do some of the work that it's very hard as a brand or a scientist to do. Now, I don't think I've got much time here, so I'll quickly show this. This is how influencers can banish myths. Actually, I don't think I'm going to be able to show this on this view, but this, you've got, you can bust myths on plastics use and how much plastic gets recycled. You can weave sustainability in. So this is Stacey Solomon profiling her sustainable fashion swimwear collection in the midst of talking about being a crafter and a mum and all that type of piece, or even leading with joy. So this is profiling veganism, basically, but the way that this gets spoken about is just so joyful and weaving into everyday life. So on that, if you remember one thing, make it fun if you want it done. So if you want to get that profiling and take up of sustainable behaviors, think about leading with joy, think about making it fun. And in 2022, the pieces I'd be recommending to look at as a brand or an organization is think about your digital sustainability strategy, how it's helping or hindering your sustainability strategy, how it can help dematerialize your business. Think about a greenwash audit of your sector, because just one player in your sector can radically erode trust from consumers, even for you if you're not greenwashing. So figuring out what you need to do around that. And thirdly, training up your organization. We need everyone on board. We need marketing communicators working with sustainability, working with the business strategy, if we're going to get this done. So sorry that I couldn't show some of the videos and there was a few issues in sharing. Thank you very much, and here for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Lucy. We will come to questions together after the others have spoken. So I would love to now welcome Jalal to our virtual stage, instructor at the School of Architecture and Design at the Lebanese American University. Jalal, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, for having me. As Rachel said, I'm an adjunct faculty at the School of Architecture and Design at the Lebanese American University. I'm also an instructor in the Academy of Continuing Education at LAU. We have a luxury brand management program, so I teach fashion marketing and fashion PR and branding to continuing education students. That's what I do as an academic. Outside of LAU, I'm a brand strategy consultant, so I work with brands in the Middle East and in Europe. So that's my professional experience. I will share my screen and I will try to be as quick as possible here. Sharing options. All right. And all right. Okay, I'll just share my desktop then. All right. Can you see my screen? Just to Rachel,
Yes,
can you please
thank
confirm
you.
that you can see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I will start. Okay, are you able to see it all? Because, all right, I think this should do. So I will start by reading this opening note in Bernard Rudowski's Our Clothes Modern essay. If the title sounds familiar, this is what was written on the opening look of this Dior Haute Couture dress from Maria Grazia Curie. Bernard Rudowski is an Austrian-American architect. I'm an architect, that's my background as well. And this essay was released in 1947, the same year Dior's New Look was released after the Second World War. Bernard is not only an architect, he's also a writer and a social historian. So I'll read this very quickly. The behavior of fashion addicts, a term which applies practically to everybody who has reached adolescence, is significant. From the first phase of timid desire for the adoption of a fad through the sheer religious devotion, as demonstrated by the punctilious care for the detail of the fashion, to the sudden boredom and physical horror for an outlived vogue, we have the perfect analogy of the unravelment of the phases of courtship, craving and devotion for the love object, and its rejection after wish fulfillment. In fact, nothing shows better the nature of dress than this resemblance. So I will stop here, and this got me thinking really because I was trying to find an angle to address the title or the topic that we are gathered today to address. And I was looking into when I started actually entertaining this kind of analogy between dress or a garment and the human relationships or courtship or love and seduction. I was wondering why monogamy still remains to be the most common form of commitment, even in societies where polygamy is committed, whereas we find it so hard to commit to a jacket or a puffer coat or whatever garment or purchase we have made. And all right, so there are some hands that are being raised, but I assume that we will be getting to the questions at the end altogether. So naturally, we actually all have a need for novelty. This is kind of a human nature. We all have cravings, which we choose to most of the time suppress and not act upon in our human relationships or human-to-human relationships. And we seem to be okay with that. Of course, we have certain religious imperatives, certain sociological or anthropological imperatives that we kind of find peace within. However, this got me thinking as we really decipher or deconstruct communications and eco-conscious communication, sustainability communications, to look further into our relationship between man and earth. So basically, Simon Sinek, I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of him. I mean, he's blown up with his TED Talk about the power of the why, his golden circle theory, as I mean, regarding strategic communication. So in Sinek's golden circle bullseye, he says that for companies or leaders to communicate effectively and achieve loyalty instead of immediate transactions, they have to communicate from the why outwards. And why here is basically the cause they believe in, the mission they believe in, their value system, the essence of their value system. And I've used this kind of theory or this kind of structure with clients, and I've used it even with students in some of my courses as they write their manifestos or how they envision their contribution to the fashion industry to be like, even though they are all fashion design students, and naturally they all go in wanting to be fashion designers. Actually, after doing this exercise, they start qualifying in different ways and going in different directions, which got me to think, is nature or the environment part of our why, collectively speaking? Because, you know, we are very invested in our human-to-human relationships, but I'm not sure that the environment or nature is really part of our value systems. And this happens to me every time when I actually ask students to define their value system and what they really want to stand for, what they really care about. And I have never had like a single student really bring nature or the environment to the forefront or to be the center of this thing that they so deeply care about. So I will suspend this for a second because, and I mean, this got me to actually do this exercise on Midjourney. I don't know if you've heard of Midjourney. It's this platform. It's an AI-powered platform which actually generates images from text prompts. So it's a text-to-image AI powered generator. You write in a text prompt, and suddenly, in less than like 2 seconds, you have images. So I ran a couple of text prompts here just to understand. I mean, I really like AI, not solely to generate more content as much as it is to understand things in an unbiased way, because basically the databases that are fed to Midjourney are pretty much all encompassing. And it's like a quick way to run some statistics without really having any statistical engines. So this is how I'm using Midjourney here, not for the visual qualities or the aesthetic qualities of these images whatsoever. And basically the text prompts, I was writing eco-friendly campaigns or sustainable fashion advertisements. And these are some of the images that were generated in very quick seconds. And I was trying to find one thing in common between all of these images that are based basically on the majority of the campaigns that have been produced under the titles or the tags of sustainable fashion, conscious consumerism, etc. And as we can see from these images that there is a particular color tone that is very predominant, which is this kind of earthly, brownish tonality. I mean, there is a presence of nature, which is a very farm-like slash woods-like vision. And this is actually some kind of an undertone, which really goes, which is quite, I mean, it's an undertone because it goes missing. I never really had this observation before running this kind of test. And when we look at most, green fashion or sustainable fashion communications, as you see on the cover of Vogue, here with Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris Jackson, here even at Loewe, it seems like subconsciously, all of these communicators or marketeers are telling us that for us to actually be sustainable or eco-friendly, we have to go back to the woods, or we have to be really part of nature in this way. And I call this first degree treatment. There is a literal implementation that's happening here. I can tell you from myself, I mean, I obviously care about the environment. I obviously care about nature, obviously care about pollution. This is why I'm here. But I don't really like being out in the woods. I mean, I grew up in a city. I'm a city boy. I love my urban life. And to me, I feel like what's really missing in the media stream right now is more ways of how we can still lead the lives that we actually lead now while still being sustainable and not just like go out in the woods and become farmers in a way. So that's one point I really wanted to make in terms of visuals. I teach about Roland Barthes when I teach about communication, and Roland Barthes really deconstructs communications into 3 messages But for the sake of this presentation, given that I only have 8 minutes, I kind of consolidated them into two. One being obviously the visual message, which is the image, and the other being the linguistic, which led me to look at linguistics and positive psychology, which is this new trend that is actually emerging in psychology and even marketing. I mean, you can find lots of essays and journals now claiming that positive psychology is really the future of marketing, as we, are becoming more mindful and aware, and we have this desire to acquire self-actualization back to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is like the quintessential reference in marketing and our understanding of needs. Even though that's not the one I use, I will show another example of needs towards the end of the presentation. And basically, the premise of positive psychology, real quick, is, let's say you want to recommend therapy to a friend. Instead of telling them that there is something wrong with them, that they have an issue and they need to solve it, and that's why they need to see a therapist. So basically, it's like there's a missing puzzle piece, and they're incomplete, and they need to be filled. Positive psychology really focuses on this premise of therapy, or the psychologist as somebody who can help you reach your goals. So there isn't really anything inherently wrong with you. And I have a couple of some of the most, typical or like mainstream captions that we find in most, green or sustainable fashion communications. I mean, we are constantly talking about buying less. I don't want to get too Freudian, but basically there is great power to words. A friend of mine, a couple of weeks ago, actually, I have to credit him for inspiring this part of the presentation. He texted me a grand rising. I was completely like confused. I was like, what do you mean? I mean, he meant to say good morning. And then he went on, he's really into quantum healing and holistic healing. And then he went on to say how morning basically sounds a lot like morning, like M-O-R-N-I-N-G sounds a lot like M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. And it has like this kind of inherently or subconsciously negative vibration, connotation, whatnot. And then he sent me this article on Freud, which really explains how we are constantly associating words subconsciously. And that's basically, we only access information with like 10% of our consciousness and 90% with our subconsciousness. So it's only natural that we really deconstruct the subconscious implications of these words that we are using so commonly. So if we take the word less, we normally associate less with scarcity, poverty, deficiency, shyness, subtraction. So it's quite a negative connotation. And naturally, as human beings, we like to grow. I mean, that's the way. We don't start like as 100-year-old men and women and non-binaries, and then we like decay to zero. We start with like 0 months and then we grow. This is the way we are kind of like, our brains are kind of programmed. And we like abundance. We like more. So wherever we are telling people that, they should buy less, there is an immediate subconscious negative connotation. And that's why a lot of people actually get defensive. So this messaging suddenly becomes counterproductive. Another one is shop responsibly. We've been seeing a lot of these, especially now with like Black Friday coming up, and all of these, green activism, Instagrams and social media accounts and green influencers as well, that Lucy brought up. I mean, they keep using the words responsibility, and also, I mean, responsible actually, and all of these words, by the way, I picked up from a thesaurus. I didn't, these are not subjective interpretations, but when we think responsible, we think blameworthy, we think that we are at fault, we think we are dependable, and this puts a lot of weight on us. And fashion is a great source of pleasure. It's a hedonistic kind of act. It's something that we derive great joy from, and suddenly it's become this thing where we have to be super sensitive, and it's a weight, whereas we really resort to fashion to almost be carefree and to enjoy it. So that's another implication for words such as responsible. And then a third word that is probably the most used one is slow fashion. And slow, again, it's lagging, it's sluggish, it's stupid. When you call someone slow, you're calling them basically stupid or dumb. It's dull and it's boring, and it's also backward. I mean, and nobody wants to be any of those things. We want to be ahead of the game. We want to be forward. We don't want to be stupid or dull. So this is my comment on linguistics. However, I mean, there is one kind of loophole for these linguistics, which we see in Nissan Burrows, again, another architecture reference, forgive me, oxymoron, less is more. And I will actually give an example for this from Patagonia, buy less, demand more. This is an example where they actually have, again, the word less as part of their campaign, but they kind of counterbalance it and they create this interesting hybrid or oxymoron, which has had, according to the Harvard Business Review by Eric Floyd, I mean, Patagonia's campaign of buying less actually led or might lead to more revenue. It did lead to more revenue. This was in 2011. So I can tell you now, like 10 years later, 11 years later, it did lead to more revenue. So this is another way using this kind of oxymoron or this kind of hot and cold approach to balance things out. It's proven to be successful. However,
going to just step in. Sorry, we're a little bit over time, and I'm just want to make sure that the other two speakers have time to speak before we go to Q&A. So I don't know how much more you've got left, but if you're able to wrap, hopefully we can cover some more of this in the Q&A session, as we still have two speakers and not much time left.
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to wrap up now, and then we can cover the rest in the Q&As, if that's okay.
That would be wonderful. Thank you ever so much. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I know that there's various points in there that I certainly want to pick out on in the Q&A. So thank you. Let me then hand over to our final two speakers. First, we're going to have Luz Lancheros, fashion editor at the Metro World News Latin America. To Luz and Alec, if I could please ask you to be as on time as you can be. Otherwise, we're not going to have any time for Q&A. That would be really, really wonderful. Thank you ever so much.
Okay. Hey, nice to meet you, all of you. I'm from Latin America, Metro World News. I'm fashion editor from Nueva Mujer and Metro World News. And as the only journalist here, I'm going to talk about my dresses. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Yes, we're going to stay with this. This is one of my favorite garments. It's a kaftan from Uzbekistan. And I love it because it's a fairy tale. And this is one other of my dresses is from Diego Guarnizo from Colombia, and he's one of my favorite designers. And with these garments, I became a rare species of kind of fashion woman, the one who repeats clothing. Maybe in that way, I like Princess Kate or Queen Latifah, who generate headlines for something in appearance simple, repeating clothing. And you're saying right now, who do you think you are? Greta Thunberg saving the world? And I will say, yes, we are. In a world where overconsumption demands us to buy new things every day, everywhere, to wear a piece all over again is strangely remarkable. Because we have to speak about the unavoidable irony of fashion if we speak about the style. A system designed to create timeless pieces, yet forced to always innovate and come up with the best new thing. Also, we have a system which created geniuses as Alexander McQueen or Alessandro Michele from Gucci, made to be copied and turned off until appears the new and special piece which reflects the spirit of time. And also we know that overconsumption is bad, but it's useless. It's a system we know, as stated by journalist Dana Thomas, is bad. But this warning, as it happens with awareness in cigarette packaging, is absolutely useless. Because we have to speak about numbers. After 9 years of the Rana Plaza tragedy, we had a growing of more than $190 million in the fast fashion market only the last year. And let's talk also about Shea, for example. It reported record in the number of these app users, more than 40 million users last year. And in digital image, we speak about more than 4 billion of views or Shein haul terms or hashtags on TikTok only. So it's quite useless. And it's got to be only with the digital era. My Instagram aesthetic is to literally die for, because in this digital era, images are made to be replaced immediately. We have to wear pieces to be talked about, remembered by, ironically, to be forgotten in seconds. Ugly shoes, statement pieces are only a part of a system created to generate news, images to see, and only to disdain. For that reason, I think that style is the false equivalent with consumption nowadays. It's not only to match, to be creative, it's only to buy new things, to create new images to be consumed and replaced immediately. For that reason, I have to propose a new way to rethink fashion. Is to create a style with identity, is to think about the style, is not about having new pieces, it's about how the pieces that we already have are put together. Style also is all about your creative self. Is even if we change with the times, we can find pieces that we could call treasures. And the main principle of fashion has been the creation of timeless pieces and statements. In these slides, I have two women from Chinatown Prairie, for example. It's a platform where Chinese American immigrants tell their stories about their style, and Aristide Cohen advances style. He's a photographer from New York who portrays elder women with style in this city. And they are creating new ways to create style. So in my country, people will say, I can't afford style, I can't afford sustainable pieces. So in that way, how could we be realistic when we are buying? And those are my advices. So first of all, think about pieces making these questions. Will I have to sell it sooner than later? It is really worth it. This is sweet with my personality. Second one, thinking pieces in any price more like investments as an instant relief. It applies for everything. And it will be a dialogue from Mean Girls on a clueless movie, but no jokes. According to a report coming from Ellen MacArthur Foundation 2 years ago, British people are keeping 47 billion of unworn clothing in their wardrobe. So imagine the numbers. And also, how many uses will you give to each garment you own and how? And I have to be realistic in this point also. Fast fashion model is unstoppable. We're going to stop to buy fast fashion. So don't hate yourself. You're still going to shop at fast fashion. So you'd be smarter at shopping. And no, you don't need all these Maddie Paris cardigans. Stay away now. By other side, just look for better options for Instagram pictures. Virtual clothing is a great option here. For example, this is from the Tribute brands, and you can wear it for one picture. It's full free sized, and you don't impact the environment. And only in just many cases, if you can afford it, but for bigger and new things. The clue is not having and being the same. And this is another big fashion system outside. This is one of my favorite pieces from Diego Guarnizo, the Colombian fashion designer, with what I'm wearing now. It's from the collection of Elisa. It's inspired in the Afro women from the southwest region of Colombia. It's very meaningful because one female politician called Maria Jose Pizarro wore it in the investment ceremony of Gustavo Petro, our first president, and she sewed the face of his father, Carlos Pizarro, ex-former guerrilla member, in that day. Also, talking about pieces with a story, we have to think about the style, about the seeking of new fashion narratives hidden in other times, and they are worth their price. Just look for other voices, for other stories. This is a t-shirt from the brand Manifesta, which is confirmed by ex-guerrilla members from the FARC. They signed our peace agreement 8 years ago, and they changed their guns and they became in fashion designers. And the statement of this t-shirt is a very political changing course in Colombia. It says, siempre fashion, nunca facho. Always fashion, never fascist. And they are changing our society with only a fashion brand. And lastly, I have this advice. Repair, transform, and don't be afraid. Ready style icons went beyond class or price. The clue is always know how to pick. We have here Isabella Blau, a fashion icon from all time, wearing a garbage can't dress. And she inspired Cruella de Vil's character, the Disney movie character from last year, and she did the same. And finally, I want to ask you these questions. Why do we wear what we wear? I wear what I wear because I love to tell stories, because style is that, telling all these stories with the power of your creative self, instead of telling the same in a never-ending overconsumption downward spiral. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Luz. That was so interesting, and there's been lots of comments about it. Over to Alec for our final presentation, and then we will jump into the Q&A. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Let me just share my screen. Okay, hope you guys can all see this. Let me just screen it. Yeah, so this is my book. The world's on fire, but we're still buying shoes. Because it is, and we are. Basically, I spent most of my career working as a fashion editor at Spice & Variety, which is a kind of one of the world's leading streetwear publications. So think Kanye West, A$AP Rocky, Rare Nikes, Supreme, that kind of stuff. And I led all of the fashion content from that the company was doing at the time. So I was basically in the heart of the fashion consumerist machine. I used to sit front row at Louis Vuitton, Prada, Givenchy. I flew out to the same Gucci shows that Harry Styles and Elton John were at. So I was like I said, I was really, really at the heart of the machine, so to speak, when it comes to fashion. And one thing that I really noticed when I started getting into sustainability was that all the conferences, the panel talks, the webinars, they were all so focused on the supply chain, on recycled polyester, on organic cotton. Nobody really asked the question of why we buy so many clothes in the first place. And that was something that I felt that I could really talk about, because I'd basically been spending my career telling people to buy more clothes. So that's basically the reason behind the book and why I did it.
Wow, I'm surprised there's no traffic here. That's great.
So basically, fashion, in my opinion, isn't really about clothes. It's much more about marketing, about storytelling, about emotions, and about branding. Basically, it's about psychology. That's the name of the game. The brands that are the best at hacking psychology with their marketing teams have the most loyal customers. They can charge the highest prices. They have the coolest runway shows. They get the best talent. They work with the best celebrities. It really comes down to how well you can market your brand. Case in point would be someone like Supreme, which basically had in the menswear space the most exciting and compelling kind of narrative out of everybody, and then became a $2 billion business in the space of about 10 years. So all that is to say is that fashion is about psychology, and the reasons that we buy so many clothes are also deeply psychological, and this is something that I really get into in my book. You know, there's so many reasons that we shop. You know, we buy new clothes because we want to feel good about ourselves. We buy new clothes because we want to belong. We buy new clothes because we want to feel excited and stimulated. And one example that I've used here in my book is that a lot of the time people buy things just because they want to keep difficult feelings at bay. You know, you can turn to shopping because you feel anxious, or because you feel sad, or because you feel lonely, and then shopping becomes a distraction. The problem is, like all compulsive behaviors, that distraction soon wears off and you're back to the beginning, experiencing difficult feelings again. Shopping addiction is a really, really real phenomenon, especially in the US and richer countries like the UK or Germany. People become really, really dependent on it. The fact that fashion is so deeply connected to our subconscious basically explains why we keep shopping, and why, no matter how much we learn about the climate emergency, no matter how much we learn about how fashion is deeply problematic for the planet, we're still shopping. So, like I said, this is a very, very big part of what I do in the book. Now, why is buying a lot of stuff bad? We all know that buying a lot of things is not good for the planet, but one point that's really, really important to make is that if you see here, this is the overall greenhouse gas emissions from the fashion industry in 2018. Again, this is a page from my book. 71% of the entire greenhouse gas emissions from the fashion industry come from making new clothes. So no matter how much organic cotton we use or how much polyester we recycle, making new clothes is always the biggest source of the impact. And yes, recycling is good, using organic cotton is good, but it will never be able to make a serious dent in that huge 71% there that you see. Therefore, in my opinion, the most powerful way we can reduce our planetary impact as consumers is to just buy less stuff. And again, of course, it's a really big part of what I talk about in the book. But if, like I said, you know, fashion is so deeply connected to our needs and our dreams and our human experiences, it's then, once you understand that, it then seems like it's impossible to buy less because these forces are so strong and fashion casts such a huge shadow over our lives. But really, the way that I like to look at it is that buying less is also an opportunity to buy things better. And an example that I look to in the book is viewing shopping as a relationship and viewing new purchases as a relationship. For example, if you want to buy a new pair of shoes, is that pair of shoes something that you would be willing to work for as well as to be getting something out of? For example, would you polish your shoes when they were dirty? Would you take your shoes to be repaired? Would you take your shoes to be resold if they need it? All of these things are an example of like how we can put in, we need to give as well as take when it comes to shopping. And the typical fast fashion compulsive shopping narrative is basically about buying things and not taking care of them and just forgetting about them as soon as you have them. So yeah, like I said, a really good way of looking at shopping is to just ask yourself, are you willing to work for a new garment? Do you want to own this garment? Do you want to have a relationship with this garment? It's something that I always point to whenever I'm shopping myself, is I always think, will I still enjoy wearing this in 5 years' time? Would I be happy getting this repaired? Would I be happy taking this to the dry cleaners? You know, it's boring and it's not sexy, but it's a really, really handy way of asking yourself what you really want out of your clothes, which is ultimately, in my opinion, the best way we can reduce our impact as consumers. Finally, because I know we're running out of time, shopping, it was really important to me that my book felt like an opportunity for people and that you could go out with the message that buying less is actually an opportunity and it's actually something that can make our experience of fashion better. And this diagram is one of the last things that I use in the book, and it's really about reframing what shopping is and what shopping isn't. So, you know, so often we're led to believe that shopping is the most important part of our lives, that shopping is a cure for any difficult feelings that we have, that shopping is the secret to a happy life, that shopping somehow paradoxically is the solution to the climate emergency if only we bought more organic cotton and more recycled polyester. Whereas really, in my opinion, shopping is actually a lot more simple than that. It's really just about buying clothes that make you feel really good and enjoying them and taking really good care of them and keeping them in your life for a long time. So like I said on the right here, you know, it's not about defining your value or curing loneliness or being the secret to a happy life. It's really just an indulgence that you should practice responsibility, that you should practice responsibly and enjoy. And yeah, that's me done. I hope that was
fantastic. Thank you, Alec. If I could invite all of the speakers to come back and join us. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. As I mentioned, there have been some great interaction in the chat and in the Q&A. So we'll jump over to that. Just quickly before we do, I have a couple of questions from me. I'm going to ask you for really short answers so that we can then jump to everybody else's points as well. There is some nice segueing between them, so I'll try and jump about a little bit. Alec, firstly, just to you, as you just gave the last presentation such an interesting insight from your book. I'm interested to know, how do you feel that we ensure the onus is not put on consumers alone for change when we discuss this topic of consumption, or indeed when we talk about behavior change? How do we, I guess, confront the magnitude of the consumption issue, but make it clear still that that shift has to exist with the policymakers, with big business, etc.? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, brands need to be responsible for what happens to their clothes in both directions. They need to be responsible for the way their clothes are made, and they need to be responsible for what happens to their clothes when they're thrown away. I think this is the only way we're ever going to be able to have a truly sustainable fashion industry, is if pollution, exploitation on the one hand, and also clogging up landfills, both of these sides of the coin need to be, we need to make it so that they just don't happen.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lucy, to jump then over to you, as I think that's quite a nice segue. One of the things I know you and I have talked about a lot before, and is very relevant to today's discussion, is that how do we address the systemic challenge we're confronting, which is, of course, that of fundamentally the profit motive, or indeed the need for businesses to continue growing, and the fact that consumption, therefore, is that kind of elephant in the room of a very difficult topic when it seems very counter to the traditional way we've done business, and indeed what businesses are there to achieve. You're muted, Lucy. Sorry. Thank you.
In pursuit of briefness, I would say that we don't have an answer for that. That we are battling entrenched interests and, you know, the petro-patriarchy at all levels. But where I would point as a potential area for radical change is Web3. And the potential for, I mean, at its essence, use, and I know we've got all the issues with, you know, mining and energy use, but that can go to renewables, but the potential for us to signal our status through virtual experiences. So rather than having like the dress that Lou's showed, which I was messaging going, I love this, the potential to actually trick our status desires to be able to exhibit the things that we need to. We are status animals without the unfortunate side effects of consumption.
Thank you. And I think that, you know, poses an interesting point around, you know, how we then do indeed start thinking differently at large. And one of the things we talk about quite a lot in the Sustainable Fashion Communication Strategy that we've written at UNEP, and that notion of indeed today's title, shifting the narrative, which is also incorporated a lot in the playbook that's coming out next year, is this need to paint a picture or a vision of what that new positive future could look like. I think without that, as Jalal very nicely pointed out, it's really impossible for us to imagine what, for instance, 1.5 degrees as a lifestyle could look like. It's too intangible, it's too technical. Or Jalal, to your point, which I loved, it looks like we need to go back to living in the woods. So as I cut you off, and to segue to one of the questions from the audience, as everybody's desperate to hear the rest, I'd love to ask you, you know, what should it look like? What is that version of a positive future? Somebody says it was too much of a cliffhanger. So, and their question was how to approach, Anna Netto, how to approach communication with positivity. So love to hear your view on what that does look like. Right.
So, I mean, I don't really have an answer or like a strict view of what it should look like. It would be too much of a dictatorship from me to come in and be like, all right, the future should be like X or Y. It's something for us to define. But what the rest of the presentation had or touched on is how history is filled with like instances of how impressible human nature is. Like ancient Egyptians would like wear wax cones on their head because they wanted to smell nice before they could, you know, invent perfumery. And then with like in Venice, they were wearing incredibly uncomfortable shoes because they wanted to appear a certain way. And then moving to the punks, they were creating, you know, garments out of safety pins. So these are all proofs. I mean, these countercultures and really bizarre fads across history, they're evidence that we can actually come together and start this kind of a new cult of some sorts, where we are more conscious and we are content with not necessarily less, but content with enough. We're not really asking anyone to like go naked or go, stop wearing clothes because they're bad. We're just asking people to recalibrate what enough is. And this goes back again, I don't want to get too academic, but this goes back to the modernist claims of theorists such as Adolf Loos and all the modern theorists of the early 20th century, where they spoke about the sustainability of style and creating these timeless pieces. This is why we are still very okay buying furniture that was designed, for example, in the 20s and the 30s, and we refer to them as modern. I mean, this word is really misused most of the time. When we think modern, we think, oh, it's something that was designed in 2023 or 2021, whereas it's something that's been there for 100 years. But we're totally fine with this. I mean, we're totally fine by a Le Corbusier chair or like a Nissan Burrows chair. However, in fashion, this doesn't really translate. And I think there is a lot of potential there when we look at designers such as Chanel, for example, and that aesthetic, which is obviously, I mean, Chanel is not the most accessible fashion house, right? Probably one of the most exclusive. But how do we take that philosophy and make it more accessible to consumers who are not able to afford like an $8,000 bag on a wait list? So
thank you. And that idea of enough is such an interesting one, isn't it, in terms of what is enough? And it's unfortunate that Luca's not here, because of course that the report that comes out tomorrow looks at what that looks like in different countries around the world. And one of the findings I found particularly interesting is when, and I won't give away the detail because I also won't get it right, but when they break down exactly what that would look like as a wardrobe for each of us, and how many items we could therefore buy each year, and what those items should be between evening wear and work wear and so on. Completely fascinating. So do recommend having a look at that. Luce, I'd love to come over to you. There's a question from Mohammed that Lucy has also already answered in the chat. But he says, is barter worth a shot to reduce new consumption because it promotes circularity? Not just barter, but sharing, giving away stuff you don't need, and borrowing for a temporary need. I'd love your perspective, because you gave so many interesting insights in your presentation as to different ways to think about style.
I think that it's complex because when we speak about reusing clothing, I think that the cycle is the same than fast fashion, for example, because people are reselling clothing and buying new again, and you're doing anything because the demand is still the same. So I think that we rethink in reusing because it's not working as we would want. And also we have to think about sustainability in very different contexts, because it's not the same to reuse fashion in Latin America, where we can't afford Zara as chocolates or candies because it's very expensive, and it's different, for example, in Europe, where you can buy Zara, for example, or Shea, and as candies are because it's too cheap. So we have to think always in our context, because sustainability narrative couldn't be the same for all countries. Where I come from, we can't afford fast fashion so easily. We can't do the same. We don't have the same narratives, We can't afford cheap clothing, which is brought from exterior, of course, and we have to produce our own. And after that, I have to say this. When we speak about sustainability, we can say, please buy sustainable brands because they are too expensive for our economies. So we have to be realistic when we speak about sustainability and fast fashion in many regions and countries through world. So we have to apply many different models to be sustainable in our different countries. When I started with Manifesta, the brand from its guerrilla members, they are doing this thing because they are changing society, not using the same production and circularity things that are demanded by, I don't know, sustainable firms, but they are changing, they are producing sustainability in other ways. They are changing all the society, all the town who was in the conflict in Colombia. They are generating new employments. They are changing, they are making new ways to produce, and they are producing not in a massive way, but they are promoting new diverse fashion models of business. So this is very important for me, because in sustainability webinars and forums, we have always saying the same thing, but it's not the truth for every country, and unless in many regions or continents in the world.
Thank you. I think that's such an important point, and others have agreed with you in the chat. We must not forget that global nuance and the differences that exist even in the terminology and the way that we understand exactly what is being referred to and how that is culturally interpreted. So thank you. That's hugely important. I've got a couple more questions I'm going to jump to quickly here. One from Charles Ross. Alec, this is to you. He says, is buying fast fashion just the monosodium glutamate of the fast food industry? It makes us feel good to begin with, but after a short period of time, we start to regret it.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think a really important point to make is that this is something that I really was firsthand witnessing in my time really working in fashion, was that people at all income levels waste their money on clothes they don't need, and they cost all sorts of prices. You know, there's people who will compulsively buy like $1,000 Prada shoes and then wear them a few times and get rid of them. So a really big point that I made in my book was that it's not just fast fashion. The entire fashion industry, for a start, is fast fashion. If you look behind the scenes and see how everyone's supply chain is set up, everything is fast fashion now. But yeah, a big point that I always wanted to make in the book is that the problem of really compulsive consumption is much bigger than just the cheap part of the fashion industry.
Yeah, fair enough. And one final one, Lucy, I'm going to pass this one to you perhaps. And I have one question to close that I'm going to ask all of you to answer with a single sentence. So Lucy, the question is, how can the media and journalists promote sustainability in a world where the audience wants to hear about the next big thing?
The journey. So there are the meta narratives out there, and people like to hear about the next big thing, and also the media tends to fall into talking about the next awful thing or the current awful thing. Again, not helping with the fatalist issue. But if you look at some of the meta narratives out there, it's kind of actually the journey that we go on to solve this overconsumption, climate change, climate justice, etc., isn't as important as how we get there. So in the interest of time, I was just talking about, you know, the successes, the problems along the way, but the journey that we're going on as a species to solve this.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to ask all of you in a moment when we turn to the closing comments, all of our panelists, if you could please share in the chat, making sure that you're sending it to everyone and not just hosts and panelists, how people can contact you and follow your work. There's lots of people interested in doing so. So if you could please each do that, that would be super helpful. In the meantime, just before we get to that, to finish up, I'd love, I said one sentence, I'm actually going to ask for one word. What one action would you point to right now as providing real possibility to drive change in this space? So where should we all focus our efforts relative to obviously the consumption challenge? I know that's a very big question, but I'd love to just hear one thing from each of you to close us out, and then I'm going to hand over to Elisa for our closing comments. Lucy, as you have your sound still on, I will turn to you first. One quick reflection on how we can all take action.
Not new.
Thank you. Alec.
Ask yourself what you really want from your clothes.
Thank you. Jalal. Oh, you're on mute, Jalal, sorry.
Accept new desires.
Love that, thank you. And Liz, to you.
Be realistic and adapt to the context.
Amazing. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody. And thank you to our audience for many great questions. I know there have been several others that people have been answering live in the chat as well. So thank you for that. Everybody has also shared their details of how to get in touch with them. Please do keep in touch with all of us. We have many more things coming out that we'd love to share with you too. Thank you again to our speakers. And I'm going to hand over to Elisa Tonda, Chief of the Resources and Markets Branch at UNEP, for our closing comments.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And let me start by thanking the speakers. It was really a very, very inspiring session. I learned a lot and I saw a lot. So also a very visual moment for all of us. And big thanks also to all the participants. I think we had very, very high numbers of participation throughout the session and a very lively chat. So we enjoyed also the directions you helped us take during the conversation. There's maybe a few points that stayed with me from the conversation that we had today. And I think that I got very much started by Lucy, who has helped us remember that we do no longer need really to make the case of why it is important, the conversation that we're having today. Lucy has been bringing us back to the IPCC report and telling us very clearly that change in behavior and our habits are really in a position to change significantly our carbon footprint. And Luz has also reminded us that in the sector, in the industry that we're operating in, that has grown so steadily in the past years with very impressive figures, Luz, millions of US dollars of growth. It's really an area where we can take advantage of a lot of opportunities for transformation. And a lot of the conversation today has really been inspiring thoughts around the how. How can we transform our relationship with fashion, with our wishes, with our desires in such a way that they become more sustainable and more responsible? And I have to say, I'm a little bit careful with the use of words that are somehow a bit part of the UN jargon, but Jalal has been helping us remind that there's a lot of meaning behind those words that may be unintended. And you have helped us see that, Lucy, I took note of a quote in one of your last slide of making it fun if you wanted to run. There's been a lot of reflection around how we can use some of the mechanisms that are currently used in that sector around how to reach close to the psychology of people in such a way. And Alex was very much prominent on this point, how we can transform that relationship into a positive one, how we can shape a positive vision around towards which we would be working and walking. And you all reminded us that this is a space which is a little bit under exploration still. And I think a number of you, when responding, were relatively clear that, you know, we don't probably have the full set of replies, but we're walking and working towards them. And that's exactly the space in which ourselves as UNEP want to be joining efforts together with you. So a lot of our scientific assessments are really very closely paying close attention to what are the opportunities in the space of consumption. And as Rachel and colleagues alluded to, there is an upcoming report on sustainable fashion communication consumers playbook coming up that is going to explore this space. But on top of that, this is very much around joining hands together with you and sharing more and learning more together. And that's exactly the journey where we want to be heading towards and working with you. Therefore, I'm really thankful that you have spent time with us today, sharing your experience, your lessons learned, what worked and what did not necessarily work, and look forward to continuing the journey with you. And again, big thanks for having been with us today, and big thanks to the UNEP team who has made this webinar happen and everybody to be together today in this virtual room. And Rachel, I hand it back to you to close the session.
Thank you, Elisa. That was the most fantastic summary of a really, really interesting hour and a half that we've had together. And look at that, we are bang on time to close. So thank you everyone so much for your inputs, again, for being here, and to our vast audience actually for participating as well. We look forward to staying in touch with you on all points. And to some of the questions in the chat there, yes, this recording will be available for people afterwards as well. So yeah, again, thank you very much, and wishing you all the best for the rest of your day and your week. Happy non-shopping Black Friday Cyber Week, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.